As part one of my presentation outlined, accessibility is a concept that needs to be clearly understood by information professionals working in online services, such as cultural heritage virtual branches. In this second part of my presentation, I will consider the W3C guidelines, the WCAG standards, the legalities of adhering to the standards, as well as considering some scholarly literature on the topic of accessibility. This part of the presentation provides the conceptual and theoretical foundation needed to move into part 3, where I present an evaluation and analysis of 3 cultural heritage virtual branches. Accessibility in online services is governed by particular guidelines and standards which information professionals need to understand and follow in the construction of online information services. The background to these guidelines and standards is written in national and international law. In Australia, the Disability Discrimination Act of 1992, which was last updated in January 2010, expects that online services are governed by WCAG 2.0. As the Australian Human Rights Commission notes, approximately 1 in 5 Australians have a disability, and this number is slowly growing. They note there is a business, marketing and social obligation to remove discrimination and promote human rights. To that end, Australia has also ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. However, accessibility is not only about ensuring users with disabilities have equitable access to the web. For example, the Human Rights Commission defines accessible web design as a philosophy and practice of designing web content so that it can be navigated and read by everyone, regardless of location, experience, or the type of computer technology used. According to Tim Berners-Lee, access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect of the World Wide Web. Furthermore, in many cases, incorporating accessibility features will actually benefit all users. And if we were not yet convinced about the importance of accessibility in terms of online services because of the UN Convention mentioned earlier, any failure to provide full access to the web and other internet-based technologies for people with a disability may be seen as a violation of human rights. In Australia, the federal government expects web services and content will adhere to the WCAG 2.0 standards. These standards have 4 key accessibility principles defined by the acronym PAW. What does the acronym stand for? Online services such as virtual branches must be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Each principle is defined by particular qualities, and WCAG provides specific guidelines that need to be met. More generally, however, for a service to be perceivable, users must be able to perceive the information being presented. It can't be invisible to all of their senses. For a service to be operable, users must be able to operate the interface. That is, the interface cannot require interaction that a user cannot perform. Thirdly, for a service to be understandable, users must be able to understand the information as well as the operation of the user interface. The content or operation cannot be beyond their understanding. And finally, for a service to be robust, content must be robust enough that it can be interpreted reliably by a wide variety of user agents, including assistive technologies. This means that users must be able to access the content as technologies advance. As technologies and user agents evolve, the content should remain accessible. There are 3 levels of conformance set out within these 4 key principles: A, AA, and AAA. The PAW principles expand out into a number of very specific guidelines, although in this presentation there is not time to detail these specifics. Federal government regulations for Australia now expect AA level of conformance for all government online services. Given that my presentation is taking place in an Australian context, the analysis of the virtual branches will be according to the AA level of accessibility compliance. Accessibility also emerges as a topic of concern in scholarly writing by and for information professionals. The importance of accessibility is signalled by a number of authors. Hacker and Parmento note that computer and internet access can increase levels of independence and have a positive impact on the academic progress and career success of individuals with disabilities. In the same article, they note the sense of community which can be built and enhanced through best practice in web accessibility and design. Other reasons for taking accessibility guidelines seriously are highlighted by Peters and Bradbard. They note that one benefit of designing for accessibility will be that the site is overall more usable and will save in cost due to lower site maintenance. Furthermore, by designing a website for accessibility, they state that one implicitly incorporates principles for universal design and usability. However, despite the clear guidelines and standards, accessibility problems are common. For example, Daubin observes that despite the existence of international guidelines devoted to designing accessible websites, most websites are not compatible with the assistive technology blind computer users usually use to convert text to speech or audio output. This is a point echoed by Ruby Wise and Barrett, who observed that despite guidelines and agreements and legislation, accessibility and usability remain issues in the sector. Although the importance of web accessibility has been recognised, it seems that practically there is still some progress to be made before the WCAG guidelines become standard across the web. The pace of change across the online landscape is one challenge. As Daubin observes, the growing visual complexity of web design has become an issue for computer users who are visually impaired. Similarly, Hacker and Parmento argue that the web has become less accessible with evolution of web page design. Accessibility is also an issue for users with low-end technology and lower modem speeds, persons utilising wireless internet connections, and the ageing. Additionally, it seems that accessibility guidelines need to be standardised and designers need to be more educated and aware of the issues. Ruby, Barrett and Wise note that web designers tend to construct for the typical user who can see the text on the screen, distinguish among colours, manoeuvre the mouse, type on the keyboard, and read and comprehend the information written in English. Some of the common accessibility barriers are outlined by Peters and Bradbard. These include images without alternative text, misleading use of structural elements on a web page, uncaptioned audio or undescribed video, tables that are difficult to decipher when linearized, sites with poor color contrast, poorly written code underlying the web design, poor navigational design, and missing headings and titles. Now that we have a more informed understanding of the concepts and context of web accessibility, we can move to the final part of the presentation and undertake an informed analysis of the virtual branches.